I think it's 18 months where we've seen the focus on EDR solutions. It's no longer a software category. It's now a software plus service category, right? With this understanding that a um, what the reason people choose an EDR suite has changed a little bit because we're not looking at software capability. We're looking at the overall solution, including the team operating the anomaly detection and how predictable they are and how much we trust them, right? Um, but then there's the service inside the service provider, right? As the recipient of these anomalies, right? You've got like your part to play, and if you don't play your part, like it may as well not be a detection, right? So it's sort of changed the nature of EDR as a tool, as a segment, as like a spend category. And I'm curious if you guys should we talk about our favorite vendors or who we hate? Let's not talk about who we hate. Actually, let's talk about. I can't talk about who we hate, who I hate. Maybe you guys can, but we could talk about maybe who we think's doing something pretty neat right now. Does anyone want
Well,
to?
I know when we talked last time, Matt, and we were talking with James, the R part of this EDR part, the responses, we as MSPs are starting to orchestrate what the vendor is now saying they'll do. And one minute we feel like, wow, it really supplements our offering because there's a SOC somewhere looking at alerts, and people like Alberto and I can sleep in maybe a little bit while they're responding. And then we realize that we have to orchestrate even their response because they might just say, well, it's just weird, anomalous RDP traffic, and that's ultimately the business app being delivered, and we just can't turn it off, right? So there's a lot in between there, and the R part has really presented a challenge to us as MSPs. It's also created a direct connective tissue to the customer, where all of a sudden maybe a service that we used to provide and really invest in might be implied by the solution. I'm not saying it's fully delivered, and that changes the sales cycle a little bit. But those are my 2 cents.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that because that's actually, I think we're all in the same space, right? We've all picked our vendors. We all have our preferred vendors. We don't have to talk about who we hate and who we love. I think it's pretty obvious who I'm on board with. Um, but the R part is definitely, something that will differentiate MSSPs as ourselves, and we have to always like keep in front of mind is you may have the best vendor, the best selection, but they don't take on all the risk, all the contracts that you have with the vendors get to a certain point. It's up to us as MSSPs to be that front line. We're actually the faces that the customer is looking at to be responsible. They're not looking at Sophos. They're not looking at Barracuda. They're not looking at Huntress. They're not looking at all these other. They're the people you're bringing in and you're recommending to do a certain part of the job. I'm personally trying to build out my team into where I will eventually be able to say, I do have somebody 24/7 at risk at night, ready to talk to the Barracuda guys and exchange information with the customer back and forth, because we are the ones that are actually knowing how the customer is configured, what their ins and outs are, what their switches look like, what their servers look like, who's in accounting, who's in operations, etc. We develop that relationship. We really just need to look at our vendors not as just what we're reselling and dumping on the customer, but how we become very efficient in doing our job and the vendors that we trust, to do that well for us.